You're listening to Inside the Village, where all news is local and no topic is off limits.
So help me, Bob, it's bully in the alley. Hey, bully in the alley. So help me.
Welcome to Inside the Village from Village Headquarters. I'm Scott Sexsmith, along with Village Media's Editor-in-Chief, Michael Friscolanti. Frisco, we made it. It's our 10th episode.
That is shocking to me, Scott. Shocking.
Not only is it shocking, I have to be honest, I'm a little disappointed. I thought the boss maybe would have had balloons, streamers, nothing. Instead, paper cups.
Paper cups. I expect nothing less.
Inside the Village, of course, brought to you by True North Mortgage. True North Mortgage, where you'll get great advice and save a pile of cash. Okay, let's make number 10 an epic one, and let's kick it off with the first word to Frisco. And, of course, this is National Indigenous History Month, and we're recording today, which is June 21st, which also is National Indigenous Peoples Day.
No, you're right, Scott. It is a very important month and an important day. Not just for the Indigenous population in Canada, but for everyone, to understand the heritage and to understand some of the truths that happened in the past, some things that a lot of Canadians are just beginning to learn now. You know, I think a lot about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on a day like today. It is a document that I actually have read. I read it many years ago for a story I was working on. It's one of those stories when I was at Maclean's that really stuck with me. It was about 7 or 8 years ago. We told the story of two runaways from St. Mary's Indian Residential School on the outskirts of Kenora. These are two young boys who are trying to escape this residential school. They ran away in the early 1970s, and their story was largely forgotten, never reported on except for a small little clip in a local newspaper, and their names are buried among many other names in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. And I spent some time getting to know this story and reaching out to the families 50 years later to hear the story of what happened to these two boys. And it was such a journey as a journalist because I went to Grassy Narrows First Nation. I met some of their brothers and sisters, their other relatives, other men who were on the search mission looking for these boys when they went missing. And it was such a powerful, powerful story. One of the ones that sticks out to me, will stick out to me forever. And what really was moving for me was that they were almost shocked that somebody was coming back 50 years later to talk about this. And they're wondering why now? But because it's an important part of our history, we wanted to tell those stories. And to me, it's still one of the stories I'm most proud of, and it's something that I think about on a day like today.
Well said. Certainly important stories, and they need to be told and told and told again.
Absolutely.
The first word to Frisco. We'll be back and kick off Inside the Village right after this.
From newsmakers to celebrities to other prominent guests, you'll find them all on Village Media's new interview series, Up Close and Personal. Join host Scott Sexsmith as he goes one-on-one with well-known Canadians to hear their story. Up Close and Personal. Look for it on your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
Welcome back to Inside the Village alongside Michael Friscolanti. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Inside the Village, of course, brought to you in part by True North Mortgage. True North Mortgage, where you'll get great advice and save a pile of cash. TrueNorthMortgage.ca. Frisco, a big issue that is happening around the entire province right now is a dwindling of farmland.
Yeah, it was fascinating to me. I guess it was not an issue I was that well aware of, but the Ontario Federation of Agriculture put out some stats last week saying that Ontario's losing 319 acres of farmland every single day. So you can imagine what that would add up to in 10 or 20 years. So it's an issue we're going to talk about with our guest today.
We certainly are, and joining us on the program now is Peggy Brekveld. Peggy is the president of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. Peggy, welcome to Inside the Village.
It's nice to be here.
Let's start, Peggy. We were reading the press release, and if I recall the facts stated, the province is losing approximately 319 acres of farmland every day, which equates to about 9 family farms. Now, obviously, we know that some of that is to urban sprawl, but what else is going on?
A lot of it is urban sprawl. Some of it is development for industrial parks, etc. And those are the most common reasons that you see the loss.
Peggy, it's an obvious question, but why is this a concern to your organization that we're losing so much every day?
Well, truly, most farming is based on land. You're not going to grow the wheat that's in your bread or your bagel on inside of a container or under glass. You're going to grow that in a field. And our beef cattle, so many of them are out in pasture. And so the importance of farmland into our food security conversations is right at the top of the list.
And so when you're seeing those numbers, obviously the concern is that where's it going to be in 10 years from now or 20 years from now? What's your concern there?
Well, that's it exactly. This is not sustainable. And every time that farmland turns into houses or into other infrastructure, once you have concrete there, it never goes back to farmland. And so you lose the ability to feed the very people that live in that city or community that is growing. And so we really do believe that, you know what, if the numbers are true and there's going to be that growth in people, citizens in the city, in the province of Ontario, then that we still can have farmland and cities growing and more housing. We just have to think way more strategically about it and ensure that we protect farmland in the conversations.
Mm-hmm. Is part of the issue here, Peggy, that there's a disconnect between when people go to the grocery store and actually realizing where their food comes from?
It can be. It can be partly that that conversation about food sustainability and are we driving the local economy, or are we buying our food from China? And really, there is that possibility. We could get all of our food from China, but do you want that? Do you really want that? And when I think of Ontario produce, it's lush, it's fresh, it's delicious, and it's quality. The rules and regulations around what we can grow and how we grow it are the right amount of regulation and ensure that you have great food sitting on your table coming from Ontario. Is that the best food we can get? Well, I would say so. I'm from the OFA, yep. But that is part of the conversation. The other piece is, I want you to think about in Thunder Bay when the Nipigon Bridge broke. When the Nipigon Bridge broke, we had about 2 days and our shelves were empty. During COVID, although it's not really food insecurity, people really actually saw bare shelves in their store. And I think to myself, if there was ever a time for people to understand what not being able to access food looks like, now might be the first time in many, many, many decades that we have this conversation.
So, Peggy, obviously something needs to be done to slow this down. Is this a question of government needing to step up to do more?
All three levels have a role in talking about protecting farmland and a role in land use planning. So that conversation could be about, do we ensure that there's easy process to add a granny suite to a house, or to change and renovate a single large family dwelling and changing it into 3 different apartments? Is there the ability to renew and review structures inside of the urban footprint, like warehouses, and possibly put commercial on the bottom and condos on top? Is there ways to do to renew the downtown cores that sometimes are falling apart? Rather renew the downtown cores rather than sprawling out farther.
So, Peggy, you mentioned the 3 levels of government needing to step up. I guess I would ask, is your organization and others currently and actively having those conversations?
Absolutely. You'll see some county federations doing delegations and talking to their local municipal councillors. You see at the provincial level our conversations and discussions with government, whether it's OMAFRA or the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, or Municipal Affairs and Housing, or even the Ministry of Environment. Those conversations continue at the provincial level. And at the federal level, we're saying ensure as well that the right assessments are done as we look at future infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Peggy, are you a farmer yourself?
I am.
So tell me about your farm.
I am a dairy farmer near Thunder Bay. We have about 75 milk cows and then about 75 other cattle to support that, young stock, dry cows. I often say I'm a first generation farmer. My husband and I did not inherit the farm, but we did buy it from someone who was willing to carry a mortgage for a while, and we've been at this now for about 28 years.
That's amazing. Can you tell me, because you usually don't hear it that way, it's usually a family farm, right, that's been passed down.
Yeah.
What was it about it that attracted you guys into that?
Well, to be honest, it was a little run down and in the right price range. Honestly, my husband came here as a student and wanted to farm, and this was the one opportunity. Sometimes you just have that one window, and we went for it. I grew up on kind of a mixed farm, and so we had goats, chickens, rabbits, and horses that we did sleigh rides with, and there was a lot of we sold a lot of goat milk out of our back door, which is not allowed, but we did it at that time, and certainly have a heart for farming and farmers. That's
a great story. I appreciate that. I've asked. I guess I'm wondering if is there part of the issue that there's not enough people who want to be in the farming industry today? Is that part of the issue? Or is it part of it also that some of these developers maybe are making offers that people can't refuse? They've owned their land for a long time and they're getting a good offer for it, so they take it?
So some of that is the challenge. If you don't protect farmland, then developers have the opportunity to buy or put in offers. As well, we need farms to be economically viable and sustainable. So that conversation about local food and buying Ontario is really important. We want a viable business that we can pass on to the next generation, whether that's a daughter or a son or someone else that would be willing to take over the farm.
For sure. And I know we've touched on a lot of these issues already, but if you were just talking to someone on the street in Thunder Bay who said to you, Peggy, why is this such an important issue? Why should I care that we're losing this much farmland every day? What would you say to them?
I'd say that my grandmother, when she first came to Canada or to Thunder Bay in 1950, she remembers the farmland starting at Waterloo Street, which is halfway through the city. And it's now city and sprawl and housing all the way out, probably double from the lake. It's gone that far. And that's not sustainable. And I want to be able to feed the people of Thunder Bay and Ontario. And I think then you have to protect farmland. Once it's gone, it doesn't come back.
And I'm sorry, I know I bounce all over the place with my questions, but you talked earlier about obviously people wanting to eat homegrown Ontario food. It is delicious. It is good. It's quality.
Yeah.
It's fresh. Do you know what the ratio is of sort of the amount of food in our grocery store that is Ontario made and the amount that is imported?
No, I do not know that number, but I do know.
Get your people on that, Peggy.
Something like that. I do know, though, that the type of food that is available is year round. A lot of your proteins, your meats and such are available year round. Greenhouse vegetables, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, that's available year round. And then there's the things that are processed from it. So Thunder Bay's got a local fellow who mills his grain into flours and puts that into cookies and packages that you can make pizza dough, etc. So it's that bigger story about there are so many ways. It's your eggs, it's your milk. It's just so good.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I wonder if this is kind of an issue, kind of like climate change in the way that we don't see it coming. We know it's coming. We're not really paying enough attention to it. And then in 50 years, my grandchildren are going to say, how come I can't get any locally grown food? Why isn't any of this stuff from Ontario? Is that a fair thing to worry about?
Yeah, most cities actually were established where there was food, water, shelter. So where the arable land was, that's where cities started. In Ontario, only 5% of the land base is arable land, and most of it's around cities. And that's why it's so critical to strategically plan how we build and what we do on the land base that we have in this province.
Peggy, is there anything that we didn't ask you that you'd like our listeners to know?
I really do see a strong local food movement all over this province. And I think that that's probably the greatest way you can support this. I think that the pressures on farmland and on farming is going to continue, whether it's geopolitical issues like the Ukraine or whether it is the pressures of development going onto farmland. There are others, even just the economy and inflation. But farmers love farming. And we love to put that, like I said, that lush, juicy fruit, that great tasting carrot on your plate. And we're pretty proud of it. So we thank you for supporting us when you buy local.
Absolutely. Peggy, my grandparents were longtime farmers in Oxford County, and hearing that you're a farmer and heading up the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, you're obviously not afraid of hard work, and you're very busy. Peggy Brekveld, the president of the OFA, thanks for doing this today.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Coming up next on Inside the Village, Frisco and I step inside the squared circle. You will not want to miss this. It's next.
Today on Inside the Village, you are going to find out all about me, Big Ben Ortmanns, my gym, Crossbody Studios in Cambridge, Ontario, and why wrestling's so gosh darn fascinating.
She had my heart, oh, very nearly.
For the latest in in-depth features and enterprise journalism from your local writers at Village Media, be sure to check out The Big Read. The Big Read. It's the full story behind the headlines. Look for The Big Read on your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
So help me, Bob, it's bully in the alley.
Welcome back to Inside the Village alongside Michael Friscolanti. I'm Scott Sexsmith. I feel like I should be wearing a pair of tights for the next segment, and I know you can't unsee that.
What do you want me to do after that? What am I supposed to say after you say that? Oh. Well, I think we're gonna have to cancel the podcast. We've hit a new low.
We hit 10 episodes. Right. I'm wearing tights.
Get to your point, Scott. You're wearing tights.
We're gonna head to Cambridge and find out about some wrestling. And it's a sport that I know very little about. But we ran a great story in Cambridge on it.
Oh, Cambridge today was one of my favorite headlines of the year. Prayers, hymns, and body slams. Wrestling Academy goes to church. And it's all about this great wrestling school that's opened up shop in the back of a church that says it all. And we're going to speak to the guy who's running the show.
Now, entering the studio, please welcome Big Ben Ortmanns. Ben.
Oh, that was almost as good as our announcer at Crossbody. That was really good.
Well, you know what? Frisco and I have a little bit of experience on the announce side. Welcome to Inside the Village. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. This is I hear this is going to be a rousing interview, and I'm excited about it.
This by far will be the highlight of your interview career.
That's
something.
Great. Because I've gotten to interview quite a few really, really excellent people in my field, and I've got to deal with some really great like people just in the regular media. So for you to say that really warms the cackles of my heart and makes me very excited for the next little bit.
Well, you're
he's gonna let you down, Ben.
Yeah, that's right. All right, let's get right to it. Crossbody Studio is the company that you own and operate, but it comes with a bit of a twist in terms of where you operate out of.
That's correct. So now keep in mind, we didn't always start this way. Journeys are just, journeys are journeys. And that's kind of why they're so much fun. You start one place and then next thing you know, you're in the back of a church. And that's where our path has led us to, which is really, really great. Me and my business partner and one of my best friends, his name is Chris Tidwell, wrestles at the Notorious TID. He's a large, scary, tatted up man. Just one of the most fascinating human beings you'll ever meet in your life as well. An excellent coach and just a tremendous guy to have as a business partner and somebody who's like the perfect yin to my yang as far as I'm concerned, and kind of making all of this operate the way that it needs to. But when this all first started, it was completely by accident because I was kind of on the outs of the pro wrestling world at the time, and this was around like 2000 and I kind of dipped my toes out in around like 2009, and then I dabbled into the mixed martial arts world. Long story short, like a bunch of years later, I kind of helped run the facility for the guys and stuff like that, and I was helping manage the place for them, so then that way they can kind of focus on their fight careers and whatnot. And you just meet a bunch of people and you network and whatnot. And there was a gentleman who owned a fight clothing company called Fear the Fighter, who, when he found out that I was kind of getting back into doing a wrestling match for my friend Chris, This was again years later, but he found out that I was going to go and do another wrestling match, and was just like, "Hey, can I sponsor you as a wrestler? Like, but as a like I would normally do my MMA fighters." And it was just one of those things that clicked in my head, because it was kind of what I wanted to do anyway. When I went back to have my match, was kind of bring the MMA world with me a little bit. So it was kind of neat that like he like sponsored all my clothes and like hats and shirts and all of that stuff. And then at the end of that night, when he saw me wrestle, he asked me if I was interested in teaching pro wrestling out of his mixed martial arts training facility that he had in Kitchener at the time. And I didn't want to do it alone. So I immediately just went to my buddy Chris, who was like there at the show with me. And I was just like, do you want to own half of a wrestling gym? Because I don't want to do this by myself. And then we went out to lunch the next day. And then I pretty much told him, I was like, hey, if I was to run a wrestling gym, like here, like I wouldn't do it traditionally. Like I would want to do it this way, with this vision. And like, here's how I would want to train people. These are the exercise, like all of this different stuff. It was just so much different than the traditional way of what he would be used to as well. And his exact response was, I don't think that you said one thing that I don't agree with. And we were just off to the races at that point. We rented a ring, and then we started in a mixed martial arts club, and then we bounced into a regular like gym. And then we ended up in this like freakishly weird, like futuristic gym called the Rec Room. And then we kind of bounced around ourselves. Like we've been in a place where there was axe throwing, and now it's led us, because of the pandemic, we're in the back of a church. It's a freaking wild story if you think about it.
Well, I was going to say, Ben, I think when you're looking at setting up shop and perusing real estate, the back of a church is probably not the first thing that comes to mind. But I guess when you stumbled upon it, it may have been fate, or some may say a sign from God.
Well, now here's where that gets touchy, because myself and Chris are not believers.
All right.
I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but we don't, so we have 4 coaches at the gym now, right? We have myself, there's Chris, there's a gentleman named Holden Albright, who was our champion for like the longest time at the company that I run, Crossbody Pro Wrestling, which is the side project that we do there. And then another gentleman by the name of Tyler Thomas. His relationship with the pastor at this gym is kind of what set this whole thing off. Like Chris found the church, and at this point we were literally, it was like, we're looking for whatever we can find that we can try to afford, because real estate literally doubled during the pandemic.
Right.
And like we lost everything during the pandemic. So it was kind of one of those, like, it was a very, very large gamble on our behalf to try to do that, because just being honest with you, it's not a money maker having a wrestling gym. It's a complete passion project. It is literally, it's a bill payer. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. And whatever extra money that does come in is one of those deals where like maybe we can help pay some gas for the coaches, but like this is genuinely as much of a passion project as it could possibly be, because we all love pro wrestling, and the kids there that want to learn pro wrestling love pro wrestling, and that's really what drives the place, is passion.
Well, I love this story. One of our great reporters at Cambridge today, Joe McGinty, came by and spent some time with you guys. So is it literally in the back of a church? Does the church still say mass on Sundays, or is it a decommissioned church? What goes on?
No, it is a fully operating church. It's hilarious. Sometimes I go in to teach class, and like, I'll give you an example. I believe it was either Thursday's class or Friday's showcase series show that we ran there, because I run live events out of our gym as well. I remember walking into the facility on the weekend, and like I opened up the door, and like I just remember going right to the washroom, and all you could hear was just like choir practice, but like we're talking like hallelujah, like whoa, like the whole like woo, it got me going. And I'm not a church person, but like I'm literally walking down the hallway just trying to get to the washroom. Next thing I'm just like, let's go. What is happening here? This is great.
So are there literally times where guys are getting body slammed and there's a mass going on beside you?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, okay, so get this. Like we were running a show on the Friday, like because every other Friday at our facility, usually I try to run these like really, like, they're only $5 shows. They're for our younger crew and like just the younger generation, like within our area, to get reps in front of, people. Reps are very hard to get when you first start out in wrestling. And that's really, your currency is how good you are, like how busy are you? You know what I mean? It's that's really like how you are able to get other work elsewhere. It's just like, what are you doing lately? So I try to give as much opportunity as I can and try to make it cheap for the public to be there every other Friday. And last Friday, all of a sudden, we just realized there was an absurd amount of kids that just walked in, and they were all from the church thing downstairs. They just wandered in, and next thing you know, they're just like, yay, wrestling. And it was like, this is the most wild. This has to be wild for the parents. You know what I mean? Like, you're bringing your child to go and sing like Jesus tunes, and next thing you know, they're just like, hey, big meaty men slapping meat. Like, this is what's going on over here.
So, Ben, I got to ask you, who inspired you? Why did you get into wrestling?
So I don't have any other memories as a kid other than Hulk Hogan. I was a Hulkamaniac, man. I don't remember liking comic books. I wasn't a cartoon guy. I didn't like, I was so infatuated with wanting to be Hulk Hogan, to the point where, and this is a real story, by the way, when I was 16 years old and I was like, began my wrestling training, and I kind of got a little bit into my training to the point where I knew that I was going to start having matches soon. I remember my trainers came up to me and they were just like, hey, so like, what wrestling gimmick name do you want to use? And it was at that moment that I realized that Hulk Hogan was taken, and I had never thought about being anything other than that. And I was like, oh no, I don't know who I am. I got to figure this out.
So here's the question that I don't understand, because I guess I'm not into the wrestling subculture. I mean, I watched Hulk Hogan as a kid too. But what do you aspire to, Ben, and your students that you're teaching? What's the goal for them, to get to the WWE?
Now, that's a good question, because that's what it was supposed to be when I was younger, but the business is it's not the same business anymore. The wrestling business it doesn't even really exist anymore. We're in the content creation business. The wrestling just happens to be the content that we create. So it's very possible, and it's more possible nowadays to make a living off of pro wrestling without the WWE than there has ever been before. The amount of people that are making a living in pro wrestling, there are more people making a living outside of the WWE in pro wrestling than there is in WWE, which before was never the case. It's really up to you. And it's funny, because I was having this talk with somebody the other day where, when we train people, you kind of have to go in with the mentality of like, we have our regiment that we train. We provide all the information that we possibly can. We give all the tools that we could possibly give, all of the little tricks of the trade that you could possibly know to make yourself successful. At that point, it's really up to you. Like, whether you succeed that's on you, because you have to take all of those tools and do whatever you got to do to make it work, because we're all different. We're all wired different. Mm-hmm. We're all built different. Our path to success are all different, especially in wrestling. Yeah.
I think last question for you, Ben. I appreciate all your time. Are we going to look back at a couple years and see one of your guys from the Knox Preston Presbyterian Church get out there and make a real name for themselves?
1,000%. They already are. We got a lot of guys, man. And like, I'm so excited about our future right now, just because we've got so many new guys, and it's really, really like pumped this new life into like the weekly classes, because like everybody that was there before, like, have these new toys to play with, and everybody's just so like into what we're doing right now. It's so fantastic, and everybody's seeing each other's progress, which is inspiring one another, so it's great. Like, we have the absolute best atmosphere right now, and things couldn't be going better for us right now as far as the gym goes. And it's a very exciting time for us.
It's a very cool story, Ben, and your passion is unquestionable. And it's been great to chat with you this afternoon. Crossbody Studio, based out of Cambridge, is the place, and the guy is Big Ben Ortmanns. Thanks for doing this today, pal. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you very much, guys. This was a real blast. I appreciate it.
We're back to wrap episode 10 of Inside the Village right after this.
Reporters, editors, and journalists who go the extra mile to get the story and get it right. Go behind the scenes with those who cover the stories that matter most to you and your community. Look for it in the Village Features section of your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
Welcome back to Inside the Village, brought to you by True North Mortgage. True North Mortgage, where you get great advice and save a pile of cash, alongside Michael Friscolanti, Frisco. Well, 10 episodes in, who would have thunk it? It's crazy, the success that we've been able to enjoy in such a short amount of time. I can't get over the record number of downloads and subscribers. It's truly been amazing.
The record number?
No, but some.
Some people are downloading it.
Some
are
are
listening.
Certainly, Mom is
for sure,
listening
for sure.
and a big supporter.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's good to hit this mark and feel like we kind of know what we're doing. We're having a ball doing it. We're shining the light on the great local journalism that we're doing around our sites across Ontario, and we're talking about some important issues that impact people all over the province. So I think if we do those two things every week, then we're doing our job.
Yeah, and you hit it spot on. We're talking to some great people and having all kinds of fun. And just want to mention that we couldn't do it without our guy behind the scenes, executive producer of ITV, Derek Turner, who every week does a bang-up job for us.
For sure, and who we would not have been able to interview Big Ben Ortmanns without him, because he's the wrestling expert here at Village Media.
Well, you know what people can't see behind the scenes is he's feeding us notes, because you and I knew nothing about wrestling, and Derek, good guy, feeding us the information.
All day.
We need to make sure his contract gets extended.
Better than feeding us flying elbows.
That's or body slams in the back of a church. InsideTheVillage.ca is where you can find all of the back episodes, of course, wherever you get your favorite podcasts and across the Village Media Network. We're back next week for episode 11 for Village Media's editor-in-chief, Michael Friscolanti. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Inside the Village.